I never thought I would be the kind of person to betray my husband. If you had asked me a year ago, I would have sworn up and down that I was faithful, committed, and incapable of breaking my vows. But life has a way of throwing you into situations you never imagined, and that's exactly what happened to me. I met Daniel when I was 23. He was charming, steady, the kind of man who made you feel safe just by standing next to him. We built a life together, bought a house, had 2 beautiful children, and settled into a routine that felt solid. But somewhere along the way, something changed. Or maybe it had always been that way, and I was just too busy to notice. Daniel worked long hours, often coming home exhausted. Our conversations became predictable. How was work? How were the kids? Did you remember to pay the electric bill? He was a good husband and father, but I started feeling invisible, like I was just another part of the house, another thing that needed maintenance. I convinced myself that this was normal, that every marriage went through this phase. But then I met Jason. Jason was everything Daniel wasn't: spontaneous, adventurous, always saying things that made me laugh in a way I hadn't in years. We met at a coffee shop near my office, an innocent enough encounter. He struck up a conversation about the book I was reading, and before I knew it, we were talking like old friends. There was an energy between us, something intoxicating. I told myself it was nothing, that it was just harmless flirting, but deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. It started with small things. Text messages that lingered a little too long, inside jokes that felt like secrets. Then came the lunch dates, the lingering glances, the way he made me feel like I was the most fascinating woman in the world. With Jason, I wasn't just a wife or a mother, I was me again. And that was the most dangerous part. The first time we crossed the line, it was raining. I remember the details so vividly because everything else was a blur. We had gone out for dinner, an impulsive decision, and when he kissed me in his car, I didn't stop him. I should have. But I didn't. And from that moment, everything changed. The guilt was unbearable. I would lay in bed at night beside Daniel, listening to his steady breathing, and wonder what kind of person I had become. I told myself I would end it. And I did, more than once. But each time, Jason would pull me back in, and I let him because I didn't want to let go. I was selfish. I wanted the thrill, the escape, the feeling of being wanted in a way I hadn't felt in years. It couldn't last, and deep down, I knew that. Affairs are built on borrowed time, and eventually, the debt comes due. Daniel found out, not because I confessed, but because I got careless. A text message left open, a moment of distraction, a look on my face that I didn't even realize was there. He confronted me one evening after the kids had gone to bed. His voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. I wish I could say I had some grand justification, some reason that made it all make sense. But I didn't. I had hurt him, shattered the trust we had spent years building, and for what? A fleeting sense of excitement? The illusion of something new? We tried to fix things, but some wounds cut too deep. Love doesn't always fade, but sometimes, trust does. And without trust, what's left? We separated a few months later, amicably for the sake of the children, but I knew things would never be the same. I still think about that time in my life, about the choices I made and the person I became. I don't have any excuses, only regrets. If I could go back, I would have fought harder for what I already had instead of chasing something that was never meant to last. But life doesn't give you do-overs. It only gives you lessons. And this one, I learned the hard way. I thought that leaving Daniel would be the hardest part. I imagined a life where I'd spend years paying for my mistakes, where guilt would settle in my bones and never let me go. And for a while, that's exactly what happened. But life is rarely predictable, and just when you think you know how the story will end, the universe throws you a curveball. It started 6 months after the separation. Daniel and I had settled into a co-parenting routine that was civil, almost mechanical. He had moved into a small apartment downtown, while I stayed in the house with the kids. We communicated through brief text messages about schedules and logistics, but nothing more. It was as if all the years we had spent together had been reduced to a shared calendar app and occasional nods at soccer games. Then, one evening, Daniel showed up at the house unannounced. I opened the door to find him standing there, looking almost like a stranger. He had lost weight, his face sharper than I remembered. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring anymore. I suppose I should have expected that, but seeing his bare fingers sent a pang through my chest. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice controlled but tense. I let him in, bracing myself for an argument. But what he said next was nothing I had prepared for. "I forgave you." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. Of all the things he could have said, that was the last thing I expected. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. He continued. "I don't mean I've forgotten. And I don't mean we can go back. But I realized I had to let it go for my own sake. Holding on to the anger, the betrayal, it was eating me alive. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I forced them back. "Daniel, There's more," he interrupted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've been seeing someone." The words hit me like a slap. I should have been happy for him. I had no right to feel anything else. But jealousy is a strange thing, it doesn't obey logic. It doesn't care who hurt who first. "Oh," I managed to say, my voice tight. "She's different," he said, almost apologetically. "We met at work. I wasn't looking for anything, but it just happened." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "That's good. You deserve to be happy." A silence stretched between us, thick with things left unsaid. Finally, he sighed. "I just thought you should know." Then he turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the house we had built together. I should have moved on. I tried. I even convinced myself I was over Jason, that what we had was just a reckless escape, a fever that had finally broken. But one night, while scrolling through my phone, I saw his name pop up on my screen. A simple message. "Can we talk?" I should have ignored it. I knew better. But old habits die hard. We met at a quiet bar on the other side of town, somewhere neither of us would run into familiar faces. Jason looked the same, but something in his eyes had changed. There was an edge to him I hadn't noticed before. "I miss you," he said, his fingers tracing the rim of his glass. "Do you ever think about us?" I hesitated. "I think about a lot of things." He smiled, but there was something off about it. "I heard about you and Daniel." "Tough break." I frowned. "How do you know?" His expression darkened. "I have my ways." A chill ran through me. "Jason, what does that mean?" He leaned closer. "I was never just some guy at a coffee shop, you know. I knew who you were the moment I saw you." My stomach twisted. "What?" Jason took a slow sip of his drink, watching me. "Your husband and I have a past." The words knocked the air from my lungs. "What are you talking about?" "Daniel and I go way back. We used to be friends. Best friends, actually. Until he screwed me over. Took something from me. So when I saw you that day in the cafe, I knew exactly who you were. I felt like I was going to be sick." "You're lying." He smirked. "Am I?" Panic surged through me. I had thought Jason was my escape, my secret thrill. But now, I saw him for what he was, a man with an agenda. And I had been his pawn all along. I stood up, my pulse hammering. "I have to go." Jason caught my wrist. Not hard, but firm enough that my breath hitched. "Don't run, Emma. You won't like where this road leads." I wrenched my hand away and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. When I got home, I locked every door, every window, double-checking them twice. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone to call Daniel. When he answered, his voice was groggy. "Emma? What's wrong?" I took a deep breath. "We need to talk. It's about Jason." Silence on the other end. Then, finally, he said, "I was hoping you'd never say that name again." The air in the room felt heavy. I had thought my story was over, that my betrayal was the final chapter. But I was wrong. Some stories don't end. They unravel. Daniel's silence on the phone stretched longer than I expected. My breath came in short, panicked bursts as I clutched the receiver, waiting for him to say something, anything. Finally, his voice was low, careful. "Stay where you are. Lock the doors. I'll be there soon." The line went dead. I stood frozen, staring at my phone. My pulse pounded in my ears. A part of me wanted to believe Jason was just trying to mess with my head, to punish me for choosing Daniel over him in the end. But another part, a deeper, darker instinct, told me there was something real beneath his words. Something I wasn't ready to face. 15 minutes later, headlights flashed across my living room window. I peeked through the curtains and saw Daniel's car parked in the driveway. He got out, scanning the street before making his way to the front door. When I let him in, his face was taut with tension. "Tell me everything," he demanded, stepping inside. I did. Every word. Every look. Every unsettling moment I'd ever shared with Jason. And when I told him what Jason had said about knowing him, about their past, Daniel's jaw tightened like he was clenching a secret between his teeth. "I should have told you about him before," Daniel finally admitted, running a hand through his hair. "Jason and we weren't just friends. We were business partners." My stomach lurched. "Business partners?" He nodded. "A long time ago. Before I met you. We started a company together, a small tech firm. We had big dreams, but Jason had other ideas. He wanted fast money, no matter what it took. I found out he was embezzling funds, making deals with dangerous people. When I confronted him, things got ugly. I walked away, but not before exposing him. He lost everything. I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't." My voice was barely above a whisper. Daniel exhaled sharply. "No. He disappeared after that. I never saw him again. Until now." A chilling realization settled in my bones. Jason had targeted me. He had played the long game, weaving himself into my life with careful precision, knowing exactly how to make me fall for him. It hadn't just been about attraction or fate, it had been calculated. A way to destroy Daniel from the inside out. Before I could process the thought, a sharp knock echoed through the house. My body stiffened. Daniel's eyes met mine, warning me to stay put as he approached the door. Another knock. Louder this time. Then a voice. "Emma. It's me. Jason." Daniel turned to me, mouthing, "Stay here." My heart hammered as he stepped toward the door, placing his hand on the knob but not turning it. "Leave," Daniel said, his voice cold. Jason chuckled, the sound muffled through the wood. Now, old friend. That's not very hospitable." I swallowed hard. Jason knew exactly what he was doing. He wanted to rattle us, to see how far he could push before we cracked. "Go home, Jason," I managed to say, though my voice trembled. Silence. Then, just as I thought he might walk away, Jason said something that made my blood run cold. "Did Daniel tell you everything? Or just the version where he's the hero?" My fingers curled into fists. "What are you talking about?" Jason sighed dramatically. "Oh, sweetheart. You still don't get it, do you? Your husband didn't just expose me. He set me up." A flicker of doubt danced in my mind. I turned to Daniel, searching his face. He didn't deny it. He didn't say a word. Jason chuckled darkly. "That's right. You thought I was the villain, but what if I told you Daniel made a deal to save himself? What if I told you he handed me over to people who wanted their money back?" "Enough," Daniel snapped. His voice held an edge I had never heard before. "You brought this on yourself." Jason's voice turned venomous. "You think that matters? You think that excuses what you did to me?" I felt like I was standing in the eye of a storm, caught between two men whose history ran deeper than I could comprehend. I had thought I knew my husband. I had thought I knew my lover. But maybe I hadn't truly known either of them. A moment later, footsteps retreated down the porch steps. A car door slammed. Tires screeched as Jason drove off into the night. I let out a shaky breath, but Daniel remained tense, staring at the door as if expecting Jason to come back. I turned to him. "Daniel, is it true?" His shoulders slumped. "It's complicated." A cold realization settled over me. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated, then finally met my gaze. "I did set him up. But it was the only way to get out." I took a step back. "Out of what?" Daniel exhaled, as if preparing himself for the confession. "Jason wasn't just embezzling. He was involved with some dangerous people. I found out too late. When they realized money was missing, they came after both of us. I made a deal to give them Jason in exchange for my safety." I stared at him, horrified. "You betrayed him." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do." A sickening weight settled in my stomach. Jason hadn't just lost his company, he had lost everything. And I had walked right into his web of revenge. A shiver ran through me. Jason wasn't going to let this go. He had played the long game before. And something told me he wasn't done playing. I turned toward the window, peering into the darkened street. Somewhere out there, Jason was waiting. Watching. And I had the sinking feeling this wasn't over. Not by a long shot.